straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
And were you able to identify who this person was?
Yes.
And who was that person?
Ahmaud.
Witnesses who responded to the scene take the stand in the death of Ahmaud Arbery trial. And an annual concert turns deadly.
They set up the barricade, so it was basically a death trap.
What led to 8 deaths, many injuries, and lawsuits at last weekend's Astroworld Festival. Plus, new court filings in the case of the so-called Doomsday duo. Why Chad Daybell's defense team say he deserves a special hearing. And later, hear from the only man who survived being shot by Kyle Rittenhouse.
Anytime you bring a firearm into that equation, the stakes are much higher.
We'll take you inside the courtroom for more on the contentious case. Law and Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I am Imran Ansari, in for Brian Buckmeyer, who is in Georgia covering the death of Ahmaud Arbery trial. Alongside me here in New York is co-host Terry Austin. After weeks of jury selection, Monday marks day 2 for the Georgia men on trial in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. Gregory and Travis McMichael and William Roddy Bryan all face charges of malice murder, felony murder, and aggravated assault for the shooting death of the 25-year-old jogger. Prosecutors say that the father and son, Gregory and Travis McMichael, tailed Arbery in their pickup truck as he ran near his home in Georgia back in February of 2020. Travis McMichael shot and killed Arbery and is claiming self-defense. Bryan followed along in his own vehicle, recording on his phone. The trial is being held in a courthouse in Glynn County, Georgia. And that is where our very own Brian Buckmeyer joins us now live. Brian, you've been following this case very closely. What are some of the takeaways from the start of this week?
Yes, Imran. So 2 officers on the day of Ahmaud Arbery's death testified on the second day of trial. Officer Ramos gave the jury the lay of the land as she saw it through crime scene investigation photos. Pictures of blood-stained driveways, the 12-gauge shotgun, and Ahmaud Arbery's body laying on the ground. On cross-examination, Jason Sheffield, Travis's lawyer, got out that the area where Arbery ran wasn't searched for anything that he may have thrown during the chase. He also highlighted that many of the homes in the area did not have fences, seeming to suggest that Arbery may have been able to run and escape in a different direction. Former Glenn County officer Ricky Minshew took the stand describing the pool of blood surrounding Arbery and the death rattle that he heard from Arbery. Minshew detailed his interview with William Roddy Bryan immediately after the shooting. Bryan referred to Arbery as a, quote, joker, but said he never heard the 25-year-old make any threats.
Now, did Bryan have a cell phone on him during this time when he's chasing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that he called 911 or anything?
No, he did not tell me. He never mentioned it.
Okay. Did Bryan ever see Ahmaud with any kind of weapon?
He never told me he saw him with a weapon.
Okay. You specifically asked him about a weapon and whether he saw one?
I don't recall.
Okay, but Bryan never told you he saw a weapon.
That's correct. He never told me he saw a weapon.
Okay. Did Bryan ever say Ahmaud made any verbal threats towards him during this time when he was being chased?
No, ma'am. He said he didn't hear him ever say anything.
Okay, so Brian, do you get the feeling that defense attorney Kevin Goff is now doubting the number of times Bryan cut off or even cornered Arbery?
It was interesting, Imran. During a cross-examination, Kevin Goff did bring that up in the transcripts through the officer, but on redirect, the prosecution brought up that there was different uses of the words, that cut off, blocked off, angled, or cornered were all used to describe what what William Bryan did, or at least said he did, to Ahmaud Arbery, to the officer.
Yeah, and Brian, we've seen family members in the courtroom, both related to victim Ahmaud Arbery and the defendants Travis and Gregory McMichael. What can you tell us about their presence in the courtroom?
Yeah, so in the court, Imran, we have Lee McMichael. That is the mother of Travis McMichael and therefore the wife of Gregory McMichael. She's often sitting in the courtroom looking straight ahead, at times looking down during some of the difficult testimony. And of course, you have Wanda Cooper Jones, the mother of Ahmaud Arbery, and Marcus Arbery Sr., the father, in court. They're often in court, sometimes even whispering in an audible noise to be able to say, for example, that the defense attorney for William Bryan, is is delaying with some of their motions in limine and also gasping at some of the more difficult viewings of Ahmaud Arbery's body. Wanda Cooper-Jones often staying for those difficult viewings, and the father electing to step out because, as he said to us outside, it's hard for him to see his son die in this way.
Brian, thank you for that excellent reporting down there in Georgia. And now on to an update out of Florida, where the penalty phase for convicted murderer Markeith Lloyd is pushed back to next month. This delay comes as a judge rules use of force by police officers can now be used in Lloyd's sentencing. The judge ruled that jurors will be able to hear about the force used during Lloyd's arrest, including what led to the loss of his eye. In 2017, Lloyd was on the run after he shot and killed pregnant ex-girlfriend Shade Dixon. He also shot and killed Lieutenant Deborah Clayton, who was attempting to apprehend him. After that, Lloyd lost his eye as a result of officers' use of force. Lloyd is already serving a life sentence for Dixon's murder. He avoided the death penalty in that case. But prosecutors are now seeking the death penalty in the case of Lieutenant Clayton's murder. Lloyd was scheduled to be sentenced over the weekend. The penalty phase has been pushed back to December 6th. And still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, half of the Doomsday duo could be headed back to court in Idaho as Chad Daybell's attorney requests an evidentiary hearing. But first, what was meant to be a fun music festival turns deadly. What went wrong at the Astroworld Festival and what legal action could soon follow. All that coming up after the break.
It was the video that shocked the nation. An unarmed black jogger, 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, gunned down in broad daylight. The three men charged will now stand trial. For live gavel-to-gavel coverage of the trial, subscribe to Law&Crime on YouTubeTV today.
Welcome back. Over the weekend, 8 people were killed and others injured during the Astroworld concert in Houston, Texas. At least 2 lawsuits have been filed and more likely to come. Law&Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with the details.
Imran, Travis Scott and Drake were the big draws last Friday night at this concert, and people who attended said the crowd was pushing toward the stage, which led to some people being crushed and injured.
This is what it looked like outside of Houston's NRG Park the morning after 8 people were killed at the Astroworld concert. Travis Scott headlined the event. Drake also performed.
By the time Travis came out on stage, everyone was squished. There wasn't a centimeter between people. No one could breathe. No one was having fun the entire show.
Billy Nassert was on the floor at the concert.
After the first or second song, they should have stopped the show because the crowd was screaming for help. Travis saw an ambulance in the crowd. He saw what was going on.
The 8 concert-goers killed include Franco Patino, a 21-year-old college student originally from Illinois. His family released a statement saying Franco was a beloved friend, cousin, nephew, brother, and son. He was loved by so many because of the loyal, loving, selfless, protective, funny, and caring person he was. Patino's best friend, Jake Jurenik, was also killed. 23-year-old Rudy Pena was also killed that night. His family set up a GoFundMe account for funeral expenses. In a lawsuit filed over the weekend, survivor Manuel Souza claims plaintiff's injuries were the inevitable and predictable result of defendants' conscious disregard of the extreme risks of harm to concertgoers that had been escalating since hours earlier. The suit includes photos of what Souza claims are concertgoers breaching a security gate and stampeding into the stadium, trampling people. It also includes a tweet from Travis Scott from 9:36 that night, stating, "Nah, and we still sneaking the wild ones in." Scott hasn't responded to the lawsuit, but tweeted Saturday he's absolutely devastated by what took place. Houston PD has my total support as they continue to look into the tragic loss of life. I am committed to working together with the Houston community to heal and support the families in need.
Live Nation has released a couple of statements on Twitter saying that the company is heartbroken and has met with law enforcement and actually provided some security video from the venue and the event. Drake, meanwhile, has not responded to a request for comment. And Houston's police chief is actually confirming an earlier report that he met with Travis Scott that night before the concert started and expressed his concerns about safety, throughout the weekend and during the concert. Imran?
Yeah, real tragedy. And we are joined now by co-host Terry Austin and former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Gene, I want to start with you. We've heard at least 2 civil lawsuits have already been filed. Do you think there's going to be some criminal liability here?
There could be, because the key for a criminal prosecution to me is, what did they know before this concert started regarding the risk that there would occur, a stampede would occur? And if you had a lot of incidences or notices to the concert organizers and to Travis Scott that there could be this problem, this avalanche that caused 8 people to die, absolutely you could bring criminal charges.
And Terry, what about the civil lawsuits that have already been filed? What do the plaintiffs need to show in those cases?
Well, those cases are based on negligence. They have personal injury attorneys who are handling the case, and they have to show that there was a breach of a duty. And quite frankly, everyone has been sued. Travis Scott, the performer, the promoter, Live Nation, and even the organizers. And the organizers said they're going to give a full refund, but that's hardly going to do anything as far as the families are concerned. There's so many unanswered questions, Imran. For instance, who did know what and when did they know it? So I think, frankly, whether or not there was enough security, whether or not there was an action plan for people in case of an emergency, all those have to be answered.
Yeah, and Jeanette, back to you. This is not the first time something like this has happened at a concert, has it?
Imran, you know, it's really unfortunate. There's a lot that you could discuss when answering that question. First of all, Travis Scott back in Arkansas in 2017 was actually charged with inciting a riot because he was encouraging people to rush the stage. He pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct in that case and paid a fine. And a man is actually suing Travis Scott after he said he was left paralyzed from injuries after attending one of Scott's concerts in Manhattan that same year in 2017. And of course, we have to go back to 1979, where festival seating was kind of largely banned in the concert industry after people were crushed at a Who concert. This wasn't a festival seating type environment, but it was standing room only, leading to people being crushed during that concert.
Yeah, a real tragedy, and we're all going to be watching the legal ramifications that happen afterwards. And coming up here on Law and Crime Daily, the state of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. Hear the first-hand account of the only surviving man who Rittenhouse shot. Plus, the latest in the so-called Doomsday duo case. How last month's development in Lori Vallow Daybell's case could have an effect on her husband's court proceedings. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. A special court hearing may soon be arranged for half of the so-called Doomsday duo. This as Chad Daybell's attorneys call for more information about allegations that wife Lori Vallow Daybell was forced to speak with a religious attorney. As Law and Crime Daily first reported last month, allegations emerged that Lori Vallow Daybell gave privileged information to a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints attorney. Vallow Daybell's attorneys argue a state-issued clinician persuaded her to contact the LDS Church, telling her it was part of her, quote, homework for treatment. Vallow Daybell's attorney says the LDS attorney unethically contacted a state prosecutor with inside information. On Friday, Chad Daybell's attorneys requested an evidentiary hearing on the issue, arguing it, quote, implicates Chad Daybell and could affect his due process and fair trial rights. Daybell's attorneys asked that the court interview this staff member and the LDS attorneys involved. Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell are co-defendants in the case. They are charged with the murder of her 2 children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow. The bodies of both children were found on Chad Daybell's property in June of 2020. Let's break this down. Terry, Chad Daybell is arguing that he has the right to see the information surrounding Lori's communication with the Church of Latter-day Saints. Should the court grant this request?
Actually, Imran, I think the court should grant that request. Chad is a co-defendant in this case. He has a right to see all of the evidence. He has to properly prepare for his case. And in fact, if the prosecution is aware of any exculpatory evidence, meaning obviously evidence that can show that the defendant is not guilty. And if that is the case, then the prosecution has to show that. I think the whole situation is a bit odd because why would Lori need to be talking to the attorneys for the Latter-day Saints? And what if she told them that it was all her idea? So I think Chad's motion is the right motion here. And I do think he should be able to see all of the evidence in this case, including any conversation between Lori and the Latter-day Saints attorney.
Yeah, I agree. And Gene, Lori Vallow Daybell was deemed incompetent to stand trial back in June. More than 5 months have passed. What happens if she is never deemed competent to stand trial?
She won't go to trial. You cannot try a person who is deemed incompetent. That's a given. But I suspect that at some point in the next couple of months, they will conclude that she is competent to testify. And bear in mind, the burden of proof is on the defendant to show incompetence. It's not on the prosecution, because a person is presumed competent to stand trial, and a defense has to show by preponderance that she's incompetent. But I think a judge is going to find her suitable to try the case.
Great analysis, and we're definitely going to be watching all the developments in both these cases. But when we come back here on Law and Crime Daily, the only surviving victim of the Kyle Rittenhouse shootings takes the stand. We take you inside the Wisconsin courtroom to hear from Gage Grosskreutz. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. The only surviving victim of the 2020 Kenosha shootings takes the stand as a witness in the state of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. 18-year-old Rittenhouse faces multiple charges, including first-degree murder, reckless murder, and attempted murder, following the August 2020 shootings in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Prosecutors say Rittenhouse shot and killed Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber and injured Gage Grosskreutz. Rittenhouse team argues that the defendant was acting in self-defense. To begin the second week of trial, the state's prosecution called Grosskreutz to the stand to explain what led up to the shooting.
In that moment, I felt that I had to do something to try and prevent myself from being killed or being shot or killed. If it meant trying what Anthony had just tried, wrestling the gun, detaining the defendants. I don't know, because I never had an opportunity. I do know, though, I was never trying to kill the defendant. That was never something that I was trying to do. In that moment, I was trying to preserve my own life. But doing so while also taking the life of another is not something that I'm capable or comfortable in doing. That goes against almost a lifelong ethical code that I've lived by.
Now, on cross-examination, the defense brought up the lawsuit Grosskreutz has filed against the city, county, and law enforcement departments in Kenosha. Defense attorneys also pointed out the night of the shooting, Grosskreutz was carrying a weapon himself, but that his concealed carry permit had expired.
You again failed to mention that you possessed a firearm. Is that right?
That is correct.
So in these documents that you are filing with courts, you are leaving out the fact that you had possessed a firearm when you were shot, right?
That is correct.
Okay. And this is, so to be fair, this is your testimony today, and how this case turns out has an impact on your ability to try to collect your $10 million, right?
That is correct.
So if Mr. Rittenhouse is convicted, your chance of getting $10 million is better, right?
I'm not entirely sure how that plays out.
Okay, so let's bring in Terry and Gene to break this down. Gene, I'm going to start with you. The defense is trying to make it sound like Gage Grosskreutz was the aggressor. Will that be enough to get an acquittal on attempted murder?
Absolutely. Their main defense is self-defense. And if this witness was armed and he had an expired carry permit, it goes to his intent. He says he's entered the fray, to fracas, to try to protect people, but he was armed. And we don't know if Kyle Rittenhouse saw a what was an object that could be a firearm. And here's the other thing, that last air of cross-examination regarding his motive. I didn't like that answer by the witness that he, quote, doesn't know how it's going to play out. Everybody knows this. If you get a conviction in a criminal case, it helps the civil case because the burdens are different. So his answer was a little bit too cute by half.
Yeah, great analysis. Now, Terry, Mr. Grosskreutz is a trained medic, but he was also carrying a handgun with an expired license. Is that going to hurt his testimony?
Well, actually, I agree with Gene, but I'm going to argue the other side. I thought Grosskreutz was very credible. I think despite the fact that he had an expired gun carry license, he is extremely, confident in front of the jury. He's a trained EMT. He knew what he was doing, unlike Rittenhouse, who wasn't really a trained EMT and who didn't know how to use his gun without injuring and killing people. I do think the jury is going to look at him and think, listen, he put his hands up, he didn't shoot at the individual, and he is credible. So that's it.
And we are going to be following this trial here at Law and Crime. And thank you for joining us on the Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.